The golden light of dawn reveals the true scale of the morning's work. Thousands of armored soldiers and war elephants blanket the plain of Kurukshetra, stretching to the horizon in a mass of steel and muscle. This is the final boiling point of a dynastic feud that has spanned generations. Every attempt at a peaceful settlement has been exhausted, and every diplomatic channel has collapsed, leaving only the possibility of a violent resolution. To settle this claim, the most capable warriors of the age have gathered here. These are individuals of near mythical skill, men who have spent their entire lives training for the single bloody purpose of this day. On the battlefield grid, the tactical reality is grim. These blocks represent military divisions called Akshauhinis. The Kaurava army has successfully mobilized 11 of these units, while the Pandavas stand against them with 7. Every political and military decision made over the last decade has led directly to this moment. The momentum toward total engagement has become a physical force that no one present can halt. On the front lines, the commanders take their final positions. Weapons are drawn, armor is tightened, and the heavy breathing of thousands of men creates a low, rhythmic sound against the morning wind. The silence is shattered when Lord Krishna and Arjuna blow their sacred conches. The blast sends a physical shockwave across the dirt, signaling the official start of the war. For the men in the ranks, that sound represents the finality of their situation. The possibility of survival has just been replaced by the immediate requirement to kill. At this second, the armies should be sprinting toward each other. Logic dictates a massive, chaotic collision of steel in the center of the plain. Instead, the momentum of the entire battlefield suddenly freezes. A single golden chariot rolls forward into the empty dust between the two lines, coming to a halt in the vacuum of no man's land. Arjuna instructs his charioteer Krishna to pull into the center of the field. He wants to look clearly at the men he must strike down. As the chariot comes to a stop, the surrounding world changes. The roar of the armies recedes into a quiet, disorienting isolation. Arjuna is now alone with the visual reality of his duty. Up until now, Arjuna has been thinking of the enemy as a tactical abstract. As he scans the opposing lines, that detachment disappears. He recognizes the specific faces in the crowd. He sees his grandfather, Bhishma, and Drona, the teacher who first taught him how to string a bow. These are his cousins, his revered mentors, and his friends. A warrior's primary duty is to protect the social order, yet this specific war requires him to destroy the very family that forms the core of that order. Every path forward feels like a betrayal. This moral deadlock triggers a physical reaction that Arjuna's combat training cannot suppress. His own body begins to fail him. His limbs begin shaking, and his mouth goes dry. The elite warrior suddenly feels a deep, cold weakness in his knees. His fingers lose their grip. The mighty Gandiva bow, a weapon that has never failed him, slips from his hand and clatters onto the floor of the chariot. Arjuna tries to find a logical exit. He argues that the blood required to win this crown would stain the kingdom permanently, making victory just as destructive as defeat. The greatest fighter of his generation has been immobilized before a single arrow is notched. His own conscience has paralyzed him more effectively than any opponent on the field. The entire machinery of war is now on hold. Millions of soldiers stand in a heavy, expectant silence, watching a chariot that refused to move. Inside that chariot, the contrast is stark. Arjuna is a shell of a man, weeping in his armor, while his charioteer, Krishna, sits in a state of perfect, unshakable composure. Krishna observes this total surrender without judgment or haste. He waits in the silence, watching as the warrior's ego-driven logic finally reaches its end. In this silence, the human demand for a way forward meets the divine capacity to provide it. This collapse is the physical manifestation of a man forced to choose between two impossible versions of right. It is the weight of a conscience that refuses to be ignored. Wisdom often begins at the exact point where human logic fails. Arjuna has exhausted every tactical and ethical argument he possesses, and that total paralysis is what changes the nature of the conversation. This diagram shows the knot Arjuna cannot untie. His cosmic duty, dharma, is pulled apart by the requirement to act on one side and his familial attachment on the other. This moral dead end and intellectual bankruptcy is what allows him to finally listen. The paralyzing depth of this inner conflict is the necessary starting point for everything that follows. One must recognize the limits of their own perspective before they can adopt a higher one. The most difficult struggle on this field is occurring within the mind of the man holding the bow. The physical combat outside the chariot is now merely the backdrop for the spiritual war happening within it.